Welcome to AuthentiCity FM. I'm Phil Corrali, here as always with my friends turned co-hosts Corey Spiegel and Mike Sable. Thank you for joining us for our 34th episode. Our guest today describes loyalty like this: disagreeing fiercely and then executing faithfully. He believes in holding all things in their proper context. He's steadfast in all that is true. And when it comes to the work of government, he'll tell you plainly, we are here to preserve democracy, not practice it. We're going to need to come back to all of that. But in a bit more than a decade in this business, our guest has worn so many hats, intern to manager, and so many places in between. He's worked for cities, villages, and counties. He's led from the trenches and guided the teams entrusted to him. He is an advocate for this profession, serving on state affiliate boards and on the ICMA board. He's the kind of person we turn to when we need someone to think clearly and speak plainly. And we'll let him tell you how. We'll see you on the other side. So, a hearty Midwestern welcome to Christopher Walton. He is currently serving for almost the last year now as the deputy city manager for the city of Champaign, Illinois, home of the Fighting Illini, home of lots of amazing things, and home to about 92,000 people, give or take, right, Christopher? I think my estimating there is about close.
Number 9 in the state.
Number 9 in the state. Welcome. Thank you for
Thanks.
spending some time with us. I think the best way to get started is for you to give us your own personal introduction of yourself, because I think that's the way for us to start rolling.
I'm a very boring person.
Oh,
The
I
end.
mean,
No, uh,
speaking as a boring person, I
right.
disagree.
I appreciate that. Thank you guys for having me on. I think this is awesome that you guys do this, and I think it's helpful for members of the profession and then also people who are just profession adjacent, people who are interested about it, regular residents and people who are just curious in podcast land. So thank you guys for taking the time to do it. I am the product of a military man and a hardworking Southern mom. I am nothing but grateful for my parents. I think that they have shown me and my family what true service looks like. And it is all about your family and doing what is best for them typically means that you're doing things to help other people out as well. And so, understanding that service to a greater cause is more than just seeing yourself represented outside of yourself, but also knowing that what you can do to help your community is actually strengthening you, not directly necessarily, but the experiences that you go through helping others enriches your own life. And then once you do that, you feel compelled to enrich others. At least that's how it should go. So that's kind of how my journey started. My father served very proudly in the United States Navy for decades, and was kind enough to leave my mother and I in sunny Florida throughout his entire career. So I grew up in Jacksonville Beach, Florida, and I would like to say that there are other beautiful places in the world, but there's nothing more beautiful than being on a beach. Um, I will say though, just as a tangent to that, I was blessed to be able to see the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, and that is breathtaking. So I will give it up for Rocky Mountain High on that. But grew up in Florida, and then once the United States Navy decided my father needed a change in venue, we came up to what was at the time Naval Air Station Glenview up in Cook County in Illinois, and that is where I had the opportunity to go through middle school and high school. My father retired, made my way to Lake County, and that's where I finished high school and then started just life, right? And did the things that everybody does. You get a job, you lose a job, you get another job. You go through school, you stop school, you live life, you do school again, you think about why you stopped in the first place and how much money you could have saved if you wouldn't have stopped. Just all the things that everybody normally does. So my story isn't anything in particular special, but I do think that it's relatable for a variety of folks. I had the good fortune of starting in this profession in 2015 as an intern at the Village of Lake Villa. And that was great. I was the first intern that they had serving under the first village administrator that they had. And that was a wild experience. Wild in the sense that you think of government in such, I think, oftentimes grandiose ways. Like you're always seeing your congressperson or your senator. You're seeing, well, maybe you don't watch C-SPAN, but nerds like me do, and you see those things, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is what government is. And then you get into local government and realize that we are not talking about structural deficits or what social ills need to be adjusted by proactive measures and in a compassionate hand. You're trying to figure out why John Doe put his yard light in the wrong spot and why an HOA president's trying to write a parking ticket. Those that is life. That is just where we are. And once I realized, like, wow, this is really everyone's everyday life, just how we go about business. It was very humanizing and humbling at the same time because most people just want to live their life. Most people just want to be able to provide for their family and enjoy their community and support their community. And at the local level, you're able to do that on a daily basis. So I had the good fortune of learning some of those lessons as an intern in Lake Villa, and then I became a management analyst. And then, like many people, realized that hard truths swing both ways and cut both ways, and found myself on the wrong end of a budget axe, and was able to then take my career to DuPage County, and I was able to serve as their policy and grants research coordinator, and that was great and learned a lot. It was a wonderful opportunity. First time really working in a partisan environment. At the time, it's an 18-member board, and at the time, I want to say it was 17 Republicans and one Democrat, and that was 2017. So nationally, things hadn't uh, evolved into the well-established personalities that they are now. And that was an interesting, segue into just seeing how things are. And in 2018, I left the county and went to the great city of Champaign, where I worked for Dorothy David as our city manager, a wonderful person who I learned so much from. I can't thank her enough. But I was brought to the city of Champaign by my current boss, Joan Walls, and she has been a wonderful mentor to me, just a wonderful human being. And I think that part of just our profession often gets overlooked. We're often seen as these faceless cogs in a bureaucratic machine when, we put on our pants the same way as everybody else. We live and breathe like everybody else. We cry, we weep, we feel like everybody else, but it's often easy to be othered because you're part of the system. So learning just from an urban standpoint, a social standpoint, what that meant to be in this very rich community that we live in was an amazing opportunity. And then I don't know if you guys realize, but this weird thing happened in 2020. It was a pandemic. It was weird, small thing, whatever. And I decided that in the midst of that and social upheaval and all the things that were going on in 2020, I thought I could do the simple thing, just low key, just completely change jobs. So that's what I did in 2020. And I took over as the village administrator in Savoy, Illinois, which is immediately south of Champaign, and served there for 4 years and 8 months, not that I was counting. And it was a wonderful opportunity to get back into a smaller community, around 9,000 population, and really put my own stamp and style on how I wanted to lead, because there's a huge difference between managing a project and leading people, right? And that's a very humbling position to be in. And working in a small organization that didn't have a lot of staff, you found yourself, wearing a lot of hats and doing a lot of the things. So it was a great education. It was a wonderful opportunity. I had a very supportive board. I had wonderful employees. I made plenty of mistakes, and I'm glad that they gave me the grace to make those mistakes. But I think we turned out pretty well. I think we moved the organization forward well. And then I've been in this role for about 9 months now. Joan became the city manager after Dorothy retired, And not to make her sound like Don Corleone, but she made me an offer I couldn't refuse. Joan is a wonderful person. She's an amazing human being. And I enjoyed working with her so much that it made absolute sense to go back and do that again for Champaign, which is again, a wonderful community, rich in personality, diverse in thought, you know, just the opportunity to be back in a college town. And yes, we are probably the home of the University of Illinois, ILL, hi and I. Um, Eh, and it's town and gown stuff is just a whole 'nother animal, it's just it's wild. And we had a lot of good success, just being a partner with the university and all of our other community agencies. I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, I've had the good fortune of working with some amazing people, some of the best in the state, learning about a career and a profession that I think is the most in tune and in touch with the lives of everyday Americans and those who want to come to our country and those who want to live in our communities and truly finding ways to build a better tomorrow. I know that sounds really corny and it probably belongs on like the side of some sort of like sci-fi bumper sticker from the 60s, but it really is what we're trying to do. And I think that that's what keeps me going.
So I'll offer a couple of things. Number one, every answer you give is the answer you give, like that you're being your authentic self, and that's why we have Authenticity FM. Like that's what you do. And so I want to say three things. So we've never met until we've got on this call, and so welcome. It's nice to meet you. We share a bunch of things, right? So I took that circuitous college route and that job route where you're like, well, that job ended. I got to go switch things. And I switched careers sort of midway through. And so I appreciate that you talk about that part of the journey because it actually helps shape who you are. And the other thing, if you've ever listened to this podcast, we give shout outs to mentors and friends regularly. We don't ever do this work alone. Anytime that you can highlight somebody that helped you along the way, we are huge fans of that because that's how this profession works and that's how we all get better. But I want to tap into something you said. You talked about Town and Gown, and you talked about the Fighting Illini and the University of Illinois. Not everybody gets to work with a Big Ten school and all of its challenges and changes. What's something that you didn't expect walking in, having to deal with a university? What's maybe some secret that makes it really fun to have that in your community?
Secret that makes it fun. Um, Well, it's interesting you say that not everyone gets an opportunity to work for a Big Ten community because there's like 36 of us now, so I can't even tell anymore like how big the Big Ten is. I probably shouldn't say that, but I think that that's a whole nother conversation. We can talk about that. But I think the fascinating part, just specifically of a land grant university, let's just kind of like reduce it down to like what it is beyond just conference affiliation, but what the mission of land grant universities, how they directly impact the lives of not only the community around them, but the world at large. And the realization that you can grow up in a community and go to elementary school, middle school, high school, and university in the same town, like the whole life cycle of education can be experienced in one place. And just the thought of how you as a person change dramatically through each of those phases, you get to see your community through those different lenses. You're the same individual. This is your same community, but your perceptions of that community change with every season of life. And the fact that we have a high caliber, exclusive, elite university that gives world class educations to Americans and people from countries from all over the world that bring that uniqueness and that richness to our community and helps our community thrive should get your blood boiling in a good way. Like that's exciting. Like what's next? What can we do? What's over that horizon? And I think that that's the exciting part of Town and Gown and finding that dynamic. I mean, you're never always going to find solutions to things, but it's the effort, it's the academic exercise of doing, what can we do to make this better? But then sometimes, you recognize, especially when you're dealing with state universities, that there are other external influences at play. The university has a mission and they are very mission centric, and that's their students. And their students are a changing demographic, very transient in nature. And they are, they're very reflective of the current moment. If you want to think about it in a unique way, I suppose you could consider, since we're talking about government, that students are more indicative of the House of Representatives. They are more reflective of the current tone and tenor of the situation. What type of skills are needed now? What type of moments are we trying to meet as a community, as a society? What is invigorating us and what gives us pause? Versus the faculty and the administration, which is more institutional, which more represents like the Senate. So when you think about the yin and yang to that, the pull and tug and pull, push and pull of those expectations and those dynamics, it's very fascinating just from what that can produce. And that's just within the organization itself. That's just within the university. That's within your registered student organizations. That's within, what research grants are going on, or what the current theme of this next college is going to be. And then how does that resonate or not with the surrounding immediate community, and then how do they see issues that we look at every day? I had said earlier in this conversation, it's like realizing that John Doe put his fence 6 inches on the other side of the property line, but maybe for us that's like okay, don't worry about that, but maybe for a student it's like, yeah, but why did they do that? Is that a GIS issue? Is that a personal interpersonal issue? Is that um, an affinity issue? Is that just an honest mistake? I mean, we just talked about community psychology, GIS. We talked about so many different themes that can be just dissected in that. So I think that's the interesting part of Town and Gown. I think that's what makes the challenge unique and also exciting.
So I want to dig into your mindset a little bit.
Oh,
As
that's
you
a
were
dangerous
talking,
thing to do.
it's my favorite hobby. Um, when you were talking through your story though, and there was like this nonchalant, humble, smooth move through what were very resilient things, right? You talked about you lose a job, you quit school. Those are like big life decisions that have very meaningful pivot points, usually in the rear view. But it was such a smooth, thoughtful, not a big deal delivery. And when I think through my own life, I'm like, oh, those are like really big moments. And so walk us through kind of your mindset and how you approach resilience, because what feel like really big moments for a lot of people were just like these little pivot lessons for you that became part of your story.
I don't know that anything I experience is exceptional or unique to the human condition, right? I think that if it's a big thing for you, let it be a big thing for you. That's who you are. That's how the moment impacts you. If it's not a big thing and it's water off a duck's back, then that's just kind of what it is. And I'm not trying to be nonchalant about it. It's just, I don't know, perhaps at some point in your life, you realize that there is more to this universe than what you are experiencing in this moment. And I think we spend so much time trying to capture the moment, and sometimes we do that to the deficit of not just that moment but the experience at large. I'm so focused on the here and now that I'm not appreciating the how I got here. I mean, there's an adage that what got you here is not going to get you where you want to go, right? And so I guess maybe it is a little bit of reflecting on just kind of, oh yeah, that was a thing in my life, but I don't even know that in the throes of that decision or those moments did I ever feel the situation was bigger than me. And that's not an arrogant thing. It's just we live in situations that are artificial. We create these situations that we find ourselves in. You don't have to go to college to get a good education. Like those two things can both be true. You can learn from the school of hard knocks. You can learn from an apprenticeship. You can learn from watching your grandfather do something or your uncle or your aunt teach you how to do something. Maybe you find out how to be a good counselor, a good humanist by watching how your grandmother raised you or how someone else's caregiver helped them. You can learn a lot from just observation. You don't have to sit down in an academic setting to do it. So I think maybe we realize those moments in hindsight, but I guess to the core of your question, my mindset of things, I think that, just for an illustrative purpose, life is indeed a tapestry. And I think that if you tug on a thread of that, you will unravel the whole thing. And I don't know that that's what we're really looking to do. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that my life is a tapestry of my own making and that it's flawless and perfect and there aren't things I wish I wouldn't have done. But if not for those situations, if not for those hard moments, or if not for those interactions with people, I wouldn't be who I am today. And despite what my wife's dogs may think, I like who I am today. I think that that's okay. I think that we're messy. We're kind of just, we're imperfect, and whether you resonate with faith or whether you resonate with social Darwinism or whether you resonate with just whatever Skynet's going to program you to do, you have something that you resonate with, and it doesn't have to be the same thing. So I don't mean to come off as aloof or not caring about those moments, but maybe the moment is only big in the moment. And once you're out of that, you don't, maybe it's not as big. I don't know.
So I wouldn't say my perception was aloof.
Okay.
It's like this sage wisdom
Shucks.
that I didn't have in my 30s. And it took some really interesting life experiences in my 40s
Mm,
to get to exactly the place you've articulated so beautifully, right? Like life is this magical collection of experiences. And one of the things that I learned that I would have only learned through the specific set of experiences that I had was that a job title is this little tiny piece of me and it's not my whole identity. And but for a set of experiences, I would probably still be living a world where my job title was my entire identity. And so my perspective isn't that anything you said was wrong. I was coming at it from
yeah.
this grand appreciation of that's some damn fine wisdom. And I'm grateful for it.
Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. I'm actually a very grumpy 80-year-old man. So maybe it just comes from that. But I appreciate that. And I think with that context, with that clarity of it, I would like to think that I have had a privileged life, right? I'm an American. That's privilege. I'm a man. That is privilege. I have my mother and my father. That is a privilege. I've been able to be an elder sibling. That is a privilege, right? I think privilege is something to acknowledge and not something that should define you. It's okay to be who you are and to have the experiences that you have. I think because of that privilege, I've been able to experience life in a way that gives me the opportunity to explore some of these threads of that tapestry in a controlled environment and sometimes in an uncontrolled environment. And I think that that's also a privilege because there are folks who don't get that, and there are folks who are, I would very quickly say, are far wiser than me and have had a less privileged life. And I think that maybe it comes from just realizing how lucky I am and taking the time to be introspective, which I think people don't do enough. I think everyone likes to say that they do, but when you're scrolling on TikTok or whatever the hell it's called now or whatever people are doing, you're not really being introspective. You're looking at everybody's highlight reel, right? And I could show you my highlight reel and, you would see that when I started this whole thing, I had a whole lot more hair. And that's not it's not the thing here. So there is some, if you will, wisdom to that. But I think I don't. There, there are plenty of people who are stuck in a certain part of life that don't have a title with it, and it has very little to do with their professional experiences. It's about where they are as a person, as a human being. And I think perhaps we allow ourselves into that artificial construct that I talked about earlier to get trapped into something where we are defining ourselves and our success and our worth based off of social predicates that mean absolutely nothing outside of the context that you're in. I, I don't please don't take this the wrong way, but today is like Administrative Professionals Day. And someone made the comment to me, you really need to acknowledge them for all the hard work that they do. 100%. They do great work. Do you really think giving somebody a card that you sign your name to is an authentic way of showing them how much you care? And if it is, then do it. If not, don't feel beholden to someone else's expectation of what appreciation looks like. Maybe it's taking them to lunch. Maybe it's walking up to them and say thank you. Maybe it's, if you're comfortable and they are, giving them a hug. I know HR just like lost their mind, like whatever, but that's fine. But yeah, right. Just like, what? You can't touch humans. Like, hello, watch. That's when you do that sibling thing. I'm not touching you, right? Like that's kind of what I feel you need to do just to loosen them up. But I think like someone said the same, like, well, they do that for us for Bosses Day. I don't give a flying flamingo if you think I'm a good boss. That's not part of this equation. If you think I'm a good boss, let it be because I've done something to enrich you as a person or enrich you as a professional, not because a calendar says today is the day you're supposed to, you know, love me. Like, what are we, benevolent overlords? Like, I don't understand. Like, does that make any sense?
It makes so much sense. So I don't know if I've ever told you this necessarily, Christopher, but one of my favorite things to do is to listen to you talk. And part of the reason for that is you do, as Corey said, have this unique wisdom in the way that you share what you're thinking about. And it isn't off putting and it isn't, it's not something that people look at and say, wow, that was provocative and mean spirited. It was like, holy cow, I need to take a moment with the words that just came out of your mouth and think about what that means to me. And I think in this particular profession, it is somewhat unique for there to be a willingness to take a beat and to think about kind of the ethereal nature of the work, right? Going back to your point, right? You're doing this because you see service to a greater cause as meaningful. And it's not about the title, it's not about the place, it's about, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but what I derive from so much of what you say is how are we serving the human, right? How are we providing a a space for that person to feel safe, a space for that person to feel welcome, space for that person to feel loved, and how are we doing that consistently? And you have worked with some of my favorite people in this profession. Dorothy David, who is perhaps one of the most uncomfortable with praise people that I have ever met in my life,
Yes.
is perhaps one of the greatest mentors I've ever had. And I never worked for her
Yeah.
because I saw her clarity of vision, her clarity of purpose, and it wasn't wrapped up in the trappings. It wasn't I'm the city manager, so therefore I know what I'm doing. It was all about being wrapped up in creating an environment where service to a greater cause or a higher purpose was the order of the day, every day, 365 days a year, every year. And so what you carry forward in some of the comments that you've made today are very much in the same vein. And Joan, don't get me started on how great Joan is. And every time I say that to her, she's always like, "Oh, would you just shut up? Just stop." But there are amazing people in this profession who do it for none of the reasons that perhaps humans do things in many ways, which is for the praise, for the title, for the whatever, the trappings of what you get. And when you tie all of that up in a neat, tidy bow, like you have, I think, done with some of your comments tonight, I come back to a lot of what Corey's research has been, which is the purpose behind the work, the ability. What is it that drives us to get up as you said, put your pants on in the morning like everybody else, but go out and do something that isn't what everyone else is doing. It's what you're going to do to change the world. And I think there is something, and maybe you don't know what it is, and maybe I don't either, but there's something that I have always sensed with you in every conversation that I've had, that a higher perspective about the importance of you doing that is what gets you to do it. That you believe that there is, you have a responsibility for that, and in doing so, you make the places that you work for better. The communities are stronger. They're more resilient. They're more thoughtful. They're more creative. So I am going to ask that's like a 75-minute prelude to a question of, is that what it is? Because I've always seen it in you, and I'm curious about that. And I think I'm not the only one who's seen it in you.
That's very kind. I don't do well with the spotlight. I think that as a staffer, and even as when I was the village administrator, I still felt that I was just another staffer, right? It is our elected officials who make the ultimate decision. And my job is to make sure that they have options that are legal, that are ethical, and that are fiscally responsible. And that's where one of those phrases that I mentioned to you and that you mentioned in your opening comes from. In fact, it actually comes from a wonderful movie, if you haven't seen it, called Crimson Tide with the late great Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington. One of the best naval movies of all time, and I love it. And that is, we're here to preserve democracy, not to practice it. And that means, it can mean two different things, and I think they're both very much true. On the one sense, um, in the effort to be legal and ethical and fiscally responsible, we need to make sure that as a staff member, we are, providing solutions that are fact-based and evidence-driven so that our elected officials can be mission-focused and results-oriented. And those are two different thresholds, right? I think a lot of times people get involved in city government or municipal government because they see a problem in their community and they want to see something fixed about it. Or they have gone to school for a particular specialty and they see that there's an opportunity to utilize that in their community. And through the process of the doing, they realize some of these nuances. And so for me, service to others has been ingrained in me through the examples I have seen through my parents. By the grace of God, my grandfather went to Normandy in World War II and came back. He then went on to be one of the first Black police captains in his community, and he inspired my father to then go into the military. And he served for, like I said, for decades. My mom put so many people before herself constantly. um, she deferred her own education so that I could get mine, so that my sister could get hers. And she has been an amazing person, but she's been an amazing mother, right? So when that's what you grow up with, and when you see others, whether it's your football coach or your basketball coach or others who just pour into you, there's no blood relation to you at all. You are someone who they see potential in and they want to help you tap into that. What that all accumulates to is understanding that there are people who are willing to help you, but your self-worth is not predicated on anyone else's opinion of you. You are worth it. That doesn't mean that you can just like name it, claim it, and get what you want. It's not how the world works. But you should feel that confidence, that inner strength, that you have the capacity to do what you set your mind to. And so, as it relates to what we do in local government, I feel compelled to help my community become a better version of itself, the best version of itself. It's part of our more perfect union that as a nation we are constantly striving to become. You're never going to reach the end goal, but it's the effort of the constant progress to that effort that should drive us, that should motivate us. So for me, that's kind of where that is. So coming back to, we're here to preserve democracy, not to practice it. By being all of those things as a staffer, we are protecting the democratic process. It is our elected officials that then practice it. We don't get to do that. We're here to preserve the institution. We're here to preserve the process, to ensure that there is confidence in the process, that our residents and our constituents feel comfortable and trust and believe in that process because they understand that by following that process, we are moving towards a more perfect union, a more perfect version of ourselves. The other side of that, we are here to preserve democracy, not to practice it, is because ultimately someone has to make that decision, right? There are things internal to our organization that only the city manager or the chief administrative officer can make. And you can take all of the sage advice you want from everybody you want, but at the end of the day, it's lonely at the top and you have to make that decision. And you need to recognize that this is not a vote amongst your staff about what you should or shouldn't do. You take in the relevant information. You may not have 100%, you may have 50%, you may have 60%, but whatever that threshold is that you need to have to make a decision, you have to make a decision. So you are right. There is something there, but I really think that what gets me going is understanding that there is the opportunity to help our community move forward. It's an element of servant leadership. It's empowering others and giving others agency so that they can affect the change that they think that they need to, that is contextualized underneath the legislative, you know, prerogative of our elected officials, but it's also understanding that you can sit there and hope all you want, but you have to also be willing to put in the work to do it. And I think within local government, I found something that I'm willing to put the work into and that I want to put the work into. And even if no one ever says my name or ever, acknowledges what we did, you can look back and go, oh my gosh, look at what we did for our community. And what's next?
So Christopher, I appreciate that kind of framing because we talk about being stewards of democracy on this podcast all the time, and that really is, I think, the manager's job is to be a steward of democracy. But you also made a joke about your hair, and so I'm going to pivot a little bit. So the
Or
you're
lack
wearing
thereof.
or lack thereof. And I can see a Jacksonville Jaguars shirt on you
Yeah.
right there. And so, and we could probably make a Troy Polamalu reference about like big flowing locks and all of those things. So I'm going to make an assumption that you might be a football fan because wearing the shirt. And one of the things that we also talk about on this podcast is you are somebody else outside of the seat that you hold. So what do you do outside of work? Who are you when you're yourself at home? What do you do to recharge? What's fun? Like, give us some insight into you when you're not deputy city manager.
I come home and I stand on my dock, I plug in, I power down, and then I wake up and when my wife unplugs me and I go to work the next day. Yeah. Um, I am a huge football fan. I love Jacksonville for all of its glory. I remember being a kid when Jacksonville won the expansion opportunity and along with the Carolina Panthers. And the whole effort was a part of, Touchdown Jacksonville. I might be getting that name wrong, but I think that's what that was. And Wayne Weaver was the owner at the time. And just watching, the city get excited about a stadium being built and a professional football team coming to an admittedly small market. I can say that now as an adult. As a kid, you don't understand what a small market is. As a kid, you're like, football, yes! And then that's it, right? So, yeah, I love football. I love the Jaguars. I'm a huge Atlanta Braves fan. All of my family is originally from parts of Georgia. And so my sister and I are some of the few that are born outside of that state. So, because of TBS, Turner Broadcasting, and all that fun stuff, just going back and forth from Northeast Florida to the general Atlanta area and some Northeast Georgia area, you always saw in Florida, you're in year-round school. So, 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off or 1 week off or whatever it was, I was constantly going up there and seeing my family, and then in between that, just watching Braves games. And my grandmother was a huge Braves fan, so that seemed to make it work. And then, of course, I don't know what kid didn't know, who Michael Jordan was. I refuse to. I'm petty. I hate Miami. I don't like Florida State. I don't like Georgia. I'm a huge Gator fan. I live in my fandom, and I understand that makes me enemies, and that's okay too, because that's what the SEC is all about. So get over it. I love just being able to enjoy sports with folks either watching it or playing it. I knew I was in trouble when, on the original PlayStation, you were playing like, Madden 95 or whatever it was, and you're just like, this is fantastic. And you're like, wait a minute, I can go outside and throw this around. But you could not jack your stats up to 99 outside. So when you got pummeled by like the upperclassmen or whatnot, you'd come back inside, lick your wounds, and play Madden and take it out on some 16-bit character that you just did not like anymore. So I enjoyed that. I love video games. I'm a huge RPG fan, JRPGs. Final Fantasy is my favorite game series of all time, and Dragon Warrior, Dragon Quest. I love Star Wars. I have license plates that indicate as much. My wife does not like Star Wars or sci-fi or anything like that. I'll share this fun little story because only because I've already like weather ballooned it with her, and she thought it was kind of funny the way I said it, so I know I'm safe. But I was wanting to do specialty license plates, and I was like, geez. And so I was looking for Vader, and I saw that it was available, and then saw how much it cost to get it, and I was like, no. So I waited. I was trying to save up for it, and then when I was ready to do it, I went and it wasn't available. I was like, no. So then I was like, oh gosh, I got to do something. What do I do? And I thought of Jedi, and I was like, yes, Jedi would be perfect. So then I typed it in, and it was available. So I have law enforcement memorial plates that say Jedi. And then as soon as I did that, I was like, perfect. That was awesome. It wasn't a character that I wanted from the story, but it's a whole subset of people. And then almost right before I closed my laptop, I realized I was like, oh, Yoda would fit. Well, I already just did that for my car. So then I was just like, how do I, So I just yelled downstairs. I'm like, hey, honey, do you have like any attachment to your license plate number? And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I was just going to renew it early and just save you. She's like, oh, thanks, babe. I'm like, perfect. So then I went and got Yoda, and just figured that when they came in the mail, she would see what her license plate was and just hope for the best. And that was years ago. And she thinks it's kind of funny now. I mean, it's pretty fun sometimes just trying to drive around and people take pictures of your license plate, or you're at a gas station and you see other people's specialty plates, and a conversation starts up and you start talking about it. So that's cool. Actually, I came across someone who had Rebel Scum as their license plate, and I was like, that is too funny. So yeah, so I love Star Trek. I love Star Wars. Star Trek. Picard is the best captain. I don't care what any of you James T. Kirk fans say. I love it. I'm a huge anime fan. I love anime. Just different genres, different types. I actually got into that as a kid because I found Japanese watercolors to be very appealing artwork. And then I started looking just into, Japanese culture, and then came across that. I'm a very, very, very exponentially very out of practice musician, so I have an affinity for jazz. I love that. I love marching band music. That was something that I did in high school and didn't pursue beyond that, but it was a lot of fun, and enjoy original scores to soundtracks to movies, to video games. Like, not like I don't care what you want to sing. Like, I just want to hear. I think John Williams is like the greatest composer of all time. But then you've got like James Horner, Howard Shore, just so many different Michael Giacchino, just so many different people that just are so talented at telling a story without saying a single word. And I love every bit of it. So I love music. I don't know, like what do I do outside of that? I have two amazing kids that I do not deserve. They are everything to me, and obviously, my wife is a blessing. She is such a patient person. She deserves an award for just, first of all, for even saying yes. Like, who in their right mind would have said yes to me? She did, and I very quickly said, "I'm your idiot forever." So I love her unconditionally. I love her so much, and my kids are amazing. We were talking about what gets us going, and just seeing them and seeing them grow. Like my kids are already 8 and 9, and I'm like, how? That is impossible. And then it makes you a little sad when you think about how quickly time passes and how human that is, and then how human they are, and then you see your face being made at you by someone else and your words coming out of a little person. And I don't know whether or not I'm supposed to hug you or choke you right now. And depending on the day, you might get both. I don't know. Like it's fun. I love them so much. But yeah, I a little bit of everything. I think like everybody else.
You know what's funny about that kid thing
Ah.
is that also happens with podcast co-hosts. And so after a while, you start seeing the thing that you think that you're doing, but actually it's Mike who's doing it. And it's like, wait, is he imitating me? And should I be pissed at him for that? Or am I imitating him? And is he going to be pissed at me for like, so it happens. It happens in all sorts of walks of life. Christopher, I think a fun part of what we do too is force you to force us to answer questions that we don't always like to answer, and don't always answer well, but always try. And so this is a great time, I think, for you to say, give Mike Sable a really hard question and me a really easy question because for all the obvious reasons.
For all the obvious reasons. Okay. So one thing that I would do in interviews with any potential new staff person is to ask them to describe themselves in 3 words and no more than 3 words.
Is this the part of the interview where like people panic and they freak out and they like go blank and they stare at you awkwardly the way I'm trying to do to buy some more time so I can think of 2 more words
So
to
here I
come
can
up
help
with?
you out and answer the question while you think of what that is.
No.
This is typically the first question I ask. And then at the
Okay.
end of the interview, I ask them if they remember how they describe themselves. Because I want to see if it's consistent. And if it changed, then I'm going to ask you, why did it change? What did you realize about yourself during the course of this interview that made you want to change how you describe yourself?
So I would say I have to use some form of energy, whether it's energetic or enthusiasm or just so I tend to be a lot of energy in everything I'm doing. And so my joke is I have 2 speeds. I have on and I have off. So I'm either awake or I am asleep. And if I'm awake, I'm going to be full energy. And so I'll just say the word energy is 1. 2 is I try to be systems. Like I think in systems, I don't think in projects. So talking to me is a little eclectic, right? So I'm often like trying to piece this project into the system. So I would say like some element of like system, and I'll just like that. Just so
So
energies,
energetic, systematic.
energies, systems. And I think the last thing is this, I don't know exactly the right word for it, but it's something else of like, uh, stewards. I'm a steward of either, I think I'm going to be, yes, I'm like a steward of the future. So I'll say steward. In my organization, I joke, like I am currently thinking about January of 2028. Because like someone has to think about what's coming. And so like, can I steward the organization through the next 2.5 years or 2 years or whatever that math is? And so I will go energy, systems, and steward. And that will be the 3 things I would say. I wish I had more time to like, we make them sound really cool. But I'm going to pick on Corey next.
Thank you so much. Phew.
Do you
Phew.
actually need more time?
Who, me or Mike?
Phil.
I am terrible at this
There are
question.
3 words. Come on.
There's a lot of, I don't know. So I'm so glad Corey's going next.
Christopher, I rarely follow the rules. So I feel like I'll give you my 3 and then maybe Mike and I should get to describe Phil if he can't pick them himself. So my first one would be strategic. I view life as a puzzle, and that's literally just how I see everything. I wake up and I see the puzzle every day. And that leads to the second word, which is creative. And so that can mean that I help edit a podcast. That can mean I make beautiful buttercream architecture and cakes. It can mean anything.
True.
And then the last thing is relentless. So if I want to do something, I am going to do it with full gusto.
Amen on that one. That's for sure.
Is that a puzzle
We're-
behind you?
That is a painting.
Painting, okay.
And then those are pictures and a Lego that my son built. But I draw a lot of crazy stuff. I'll have to dig them out while Phil's thinking of his 3 words.
Now look,
Um,
here's the thing. Here's the thing. I struggle with self descriptors because I don't really like to think about it all that much. I know they exist, and Corey and Mike, I'm sure, are going to be very helpful in filling out a list that's probably going to be 30 words long. So one that I think is hard to not jump to is committed. I am generally once I'm in, I'm in. It sometimes takes me a bit to get there, but I won't stop once the commitment has come into view. And so I don't stop running. I run every day because I committed to do it 3.5, almost 4 years ago. And so now that's what I do. If I'm committed to service or I'm committed to the organization, I'm committed to a program or a project, we're going to see it through. You can talk me off of it if it's broken, not working, and I'll be committed to coming to the next thing. But that's a word that I would use. There's, for lack of a better term, and I don't really know what word to use on this, is uncomfortable. And I will use that in nearly every area of my life, in that I am 9 times out of 10 going to be uncomfortable in whatever scenario or situation I'm in. And I will be very well masked in that I think that most times, most people would not assume that there is discomfort or that I'm uncomfortable in a situation or a circumstance. But I'm often uncomfortable in my own brain, and find good ways to stay deeply in my head, which comes frequently into conflict with my committedness, because I can be too committed to being in my head, which keeps me from moving forward, or the discomfort actually pushes me to commit. And so, because then the relentlessness perhaps stops. And the other is, again, I don't have the word for it, but I'll describe kind of the feeling. I want others to feel better. And I don't know if that comes from a place of my own discomfort. And so I want others to not be uncomfortable, but I will frequently find ways to make somebody else's life better in my work, in my family, in my personal friendships, in reaching out, trying to support, trying to offer advice, feedback, thoughts. Those 3 are a good 33% of myself in each iteration. And I'm not going to ask what the other 2 think, because they're going to
No. I'm going to say, well, I'm going to say something. So I went first and I did a really poor job, because that's one of our commitments is like, we'll answer it. So I've put into the
Didn't you say
machine.
that the answers are the answers?
Well,
That's right.
We also have a 4th answer, which is our AI overlords know us pretty well. And so we have actually put all of the text of the podcast into the machines and said, hey, how would you describe us? And so I just did it on the device. And it said, what are the 3 words that describe me as a podcast host? And they said, curious, insightful, and provocative. And I feel like that is such a much better answer than the thing that I fumbled through.
I liked your original ones.
Well, I appreciate that. But our AI overlords have described it. So, so Christopher, I'm going to turn the tables on you. What are your 3?
Yielding, focused, faithful. I think that, Phil mentioned committed or commitment.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you have to be unyielding in your convictions. Because if you're not, then they're not convictions. They're just whatever popular opinion is at the time. And I can't suffer that. I just it's hard for me to do that. And it's interesting. I'm not speaking of any particular political individual, but I'm just saying generally speaking, say what you mean and mean what you say. Okay. Robin Williams made a joke a long time ago that we should just have our politician wear race suits like the NASCAR folks do so we can see who sponsors them. And that way we can know, like, okay, you said that. I understand why you said that. But you that's not how things are, right? Um, it's okay to be unyielding in that. And I don't mean that in the negative sense, like, we're just gonna I'm stubborn and I'm not gonna change anything. Like be true to your convictions. I think that's one of the things that Phil had mentioned at the top that I had said earlier, is just being steadfast in all that is true. Full is it is something that I don't deserve all the grace that I've been given. And I recognize that. And I recognize that there are others who would kill for the opportunities to have the opportunities that I've had. So when I find a way to serve, it is being true and faithful in that service. And I really do. I take it personally. It hurts when I see someone else hurt, but not in like the bleeding heart kind of way. And I don't mean that as a disparaging way to anyone else. It's just I'm not overly empathetic to things, but when I see when I see injustice, when I see something that is to me wrong, I feel so unyielding in wanting that to get fixed, but then also faithful to the process of getting it fixed, truly, truly fixed. I think something that's interesting too is to consider, how would you describe our profession? Like, do you feel that the profession can be synthesized down into something that is three words or in a phrase? And is that phrase more true for you today than it was when you started? And if not, why?
Well, must be listening to the podcast, because we have been circling this issue for weeks now. And so I am actually going to turn it over. I think I'm going to turn it over to Phil to go first.
That is a really interesting question, because as you are saying it, this fell out of my pocket
The code of
onto my
ethics.
desk. And I can't say that I typically carry it in a pocket, but for some reason it showed up in my coat today. And I think as we the code of ethics tries in many ways to encapsulate the profession, or at least the decision-making tree within the profession, right? The things that we're going to be faced with during the course of a day, week, month career are we seek to try to give them structure by saying this is a good way to consider how you respond to them, to those issues. And I think it's never been simple. But I would say that the code of ethics was an easier map in 2002 when I started my internship. And I think the code of ethics is a wonderful bellwether, but man, oh man, did it not necessarily anticipate some of the stuff. And so when we try to say what does the profession mean to us, I can't give you a phrase. I can't give you a word or two, other than to say, we. I hate saying these things out loud because they sound so self-serving, but we really are, with one foot in the real world and one foot in this principled, idealized environment where we are trying to bridge the two together and do so in a way that serves the greater good, that moves forward the good and pushes back the bad. It sounds a little bit like a superhero meme, but I think we sometimes have to think of it that way. And so, um, I would say, just from that standpoint, that the profession in 2026 Phil land versus the profession in 2002 Phil land is similar. I think I felt the same way about being kind of bridged, but I've not been quite so stretched as I am now, and I don't know that anyone in our profession is comfortable in that space, because um, that space is not comfortable, and it's getting less so every day.
So I will come at it from a little different perspective. There are not three words, there is not a succinct single phrase, and there shouldn't be. This country, you use the word tapestry. This country is complex. Its communities are complex. Its people are complex. And so to try to distill it down to three words that 280, 300 million, whatever the number is now, is an injustice to local democracy. And the same for kind of, if it's a paragraph, if it's a single word. I don't think that's fair, and it wouldn't be responsible. But I'll add one of the things I've spent a lot of time researching on. And so Mike talks systems. When Mike and I talk offline, we nerd out about systems and why so many systems in our country are broken. And I spent my morning researching why education is broken, for example. And one of the things I've been researching is this idea of multi-horizon thinking, right? So we live our lives in this event horizon. What happened to me today? Someone cut me off. That's an event. I have a budget decision to make. That's an event. But that's like this little microcosm of how you kind of described our place in life. There are trends, there are systems, and then there are civilizational eras. And we're at this point in time where they're all resetting. And so I think we have an obligation to look out further and beyond how we see government as it existed for the last 20 years or even the last 250 years, and say that that's not going to work for the next 250. And so there's a real obligation for this point in time, for this profession and everyone in public service, to say, here's what better looks like, and I'm going to do the work to help build it.
I'm gonna punt again and just put it back to Christopher, because that's such a provocative question. So, uh, I would be curious to see how you would approach it, because I think you come at it from sort of this. You've talked throughout your conversation. You've talked about this privilege of being able to serve, whether it's watching your grandfather storm, right? Not watch, but like your grandfather become the first captain in the police department. Your dad served in the Navy. Your mom served the family and served the community. Now you're in service to the community. Um, I think I don't like, as Corey said, there's not a through line, but there is this thread of service to your fellow man. And that's a Michael Wilkes quote from, right. The guy who cuts the grass in the park every day is probably as responsible for team building and friendships and camaraderie, and the creating a space for kids to come together and grow and flourish as anybody else in our community. And that, the guy who cuts the grass does as much to foster camaraderie and teamwork and collaboration as the city manager does, because they're the ones that makes that place that happen. So I weave all of that through to say, I would be curious to see how your legacy of service informs the question that you asked.
Well, I think, and I think, Corey, you made a very interesting comment, and what had me pondering is you said that you thought trying to distill it down would be irresponsible, and I picked up on that just because I think part of it is a thought exercise. I mean, you are more than the three words you use to describe yourself, or the three attributes you use to describe yourselves, but those are the most poignant ones that you think drive all the others. So I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's irresponsible. I think it is provocative. It is thought provoking, because what is it that we are trying to tell people? Because at the end of the day, we as a profession are trying to convince other individuals and other communities that the way we go about business is the right way for our community. There are strong mayors, there are commissions, there are executives, there are other things. So when we are advocating for our profession, the way that we go about doing that has to meet the moment that we're in right now. When you can skip after 5 seconds of whatever the ad is, that you have less than that to try to convince someone why what we're doing is the right thing. And it seems right now that the moment is that there are many people within our communities that are looking for a cause to rally to, or they like finding causes, and it's those causes that give them that image of themselves being represented outside of themselves that they want to continue to pursue. So if I was to answer the question, I would say nonpartisan professional service. And that is how I would describe our community, because there's a difference between being nonpartisan and apolitical. We are not apolitical, and that's okay, but we are nonpartisan, right? And understanding your own implicit biases is one thing. And I know that every researcher sees that, and we all have those. We have to check those at the door. We're human beings. We are flawed. We are going to make mistakes. That doesn't mean that you can't be you and that you shouldn't be you, but you are in this moment, the moment that you were talking about, when we're seeing things change in the country, when our communities, whether they're in Minnesota or Broadview or in LA, are going through things that our communities want us to have this visceral reaction to. And it's not that you as an individual person cannot, but we as a profession must be able to say, is it legal? Is it ethical? And is it fiscally responsible? And does my nonpartisan professional service move the needle in the way that it needs to? Am I giving my elected officials that fact-based and evidence-driven solution so that they truly can be mission focused for their community and results oriented? These are oversimplistic ways of describing it, but I feel like we have to be able to describe it in that manner so that we can show the efficacy of the work that we're doing to a group of people or to a population that sees government as a monolith, in the same way that some elements of our government see some of our communities as a monolith. And then that one social ill is all social ills, and that the root is the root for everything. And that is not true. So I think that it's important that we are able to do it while also being able to expand on it and saying that there is a universe. There is a universe of experience and of reasons why it's so complex, and it's not that simple. But oftentimes it's not the lecture that you remember, it's the line, right? You can sit through something and hear something that resonates with you. I mean, one of the first things that Phil had mentioned at the top in the introduction was my belief of loyalty. But that actually is a paraphrase from one of General Colin Powell's 13 rules of leadership. And I truly do believe that loyalty is disagreeing fiercely, feverishly, even passionately, but then executing faithfully. We in our profession do not agree with every decision that is made. We just don't. We never have and we never will. But we distinguish ourselves by executing faithfully. We know how to implement. We know how to research. We know how to get community input and community feedback. We know how to contextualize the issue so that it matters and resonates with our elected officials and with our constituents. But we also know that at the end of the day, the trust in our part of the system comes from our ability to faithfully execute, even if people disagree with it. So I 100% agree with you. I think that it is too nebulous and too complex to just say this is what it is and that's how it's going to be forever. But I also think that we have to at least take the effort to try to be able to communicate in the 5 seconds that we get with somebody. I mean, I think everybody on this podcast has heard at some point or another, give me your elevator pitch. Right? As a staffer, and I'm trying to give someone like the 30-second elevator pitch of this piece of legislation before they hit the floor so they can go vote on it. Think about that for a second. Like, this is a tangent and I apologize. But what in the actual F is going on when you get that, or you give that as a staff person to an elected official and they're like, this is what I'm about to cast my vote on. This is what I am going to use my community's voice on. The 30 seconds in the elevator I had with you and the one pager that you gave me so that I can vote on a bill that I didn't read. That is a travesty of democracy, of a representative federalist republic, because we're not a true democracy, but that's a horse of a different color and a conversation for a different day. But that's what we do. We can recognize sometimes you just have to bow to the absurd. You recognize the absurdity of the process and you see what it is. But we also recognize that in order for us to make the best decisions for our community, we have to work within the systems that we find ourselves in, and we have to slowly work to change those because these are battleships. These are not patrol boats. It's going to take a while for this thing to turn around. And it's that thing that we talked about earlier that keeps us up, that gets us going, that we wake up and saying, I'm making just more of that turn. I've talked to these residents, and I've talked to these stakeholders, and I've talked to my elected officials, and I think we're moving on this. So I truly do think, like, if you're turning the question back to me and saying, describe our profession in 3 words, it is nonpartisan professional service.
Christopher, thank you for spending time with us and answering complicated questions about complicated subjects and recognizing, I think, to paraphrase one of my favorite TV shows ever, which is The West Wing, that it's a big country and a lot has to get done, and we only have so much time to do it. And sometimes you just have to act. And so I don't know if it's disingenuous to the democratic process, but sometimes the stuff just has to get done. And so
That is
thank
where
you
the what's
for
next comes from.
that is exactly right. That's exactly right. Thank you for spending the time with us. The other tradition that we have established is to always give our guests the last word. And so I'm going to turn it back to you for that last parting message.
Thank you for the opportunity to be on here, and thank you guys for doing this podcast. I think it's important, and I hope you continue to do it. For anyone who's listening to this, whether you're in the profession, whether you're curious about the profession, or whether you just think government is a bunch of schmuck and we don't know what we're doing, thank you for watching. I think that your engagement is equally important and your voice is equally needed in this conversation. Everything we do as a country is supposed to be an effort to that more perfect union. And regardless of where you find yourself on the political spectrum or on no spectrum at all, you matter. And your self worth is not predicated on someone else's opinion of you. So I encourage you and I welcome you to join these conversations. Join the conversations in your community, at work, at church, in your homes, just not on Thanksgiving, and find ways to to help us make progress towards that more perfect union. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you. And that's a wrap for episode 34 with Christopher Walton. Thank you for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.